Picture this. It is 2 a.m. on a Wednesday.
Oh, the classic 2 a.m. cram session.
Exactly. You are on your third mug of Earl Grey tea, or let's be honest. So, picture this. It is 2 a.m. on a Wednesday.
Oh, the classic 2 a.m. cram session.
Exactly. You are on your third mug of Earl Grey tea, or let's be honest, probably your fourth espresso. No judgment at all.
None whatsoever. We've all been there.
And you are just staring at a textbook. Or maybe it's this massive, completely unforgiving quarterly report for work, and your eyes are practically blurring at this point.
The words are literally just swimming off the page.
Right. And you are desperately trying to study to somehow absorb this absolute mountain of data, and you catch yourself wishing, just for a second, that you could blink, take a perfect mental snapshot of the page and just have it.
Just download it directly to the hard drive.
Yeah. Like you just want to close the book, go to sleep, wake up, and magically access that page in your brain like a pristine, high-resolution JPEG.
So the question we're asking today is, does that superpower actually exist?
It's the billion-dollar question of human cognition, honestly. Are there people walking around who can just, scan a room, blink, and download the visual data perfectly? Well, you have this deep dive queued up right at the top of your audiobook playlist. And our mission for the next hour is to distill an entire, deeply fascinating book, specifically Logan G. Davidson's Photographic Memory, into a single, high-yield audio experience.
We are going to definitively answer that 2 a.m. question.
Yes, we are.
And, the premise of that 2 a.m. wish, the spiff-gope of what we're going to explore today, is going to dismantle basically everything you thought you knew about that exact scenario.
I am so ready to dismantle this.
Good, because we are going to deconstruct the myth versus the reality of the so-called photographic memory. We'll get into the verified biological mechanics of the human brain actually encodes, stores, and retrieves data.
Which means debunking a lot of garbage.
So much garbage. Centuries of memory myths that pop culture and Hollywood have just continuously fed us.
Love that.
But most importantly, we are going to extract actionable, scientifically verified techniques. And I mean everything from hardcore military training exercises designed to literally push the limits of neuroplasticity all the way down to these surprisingly simple, kind of bizarre strategies.
It's a fist clenching thing.
Yes, intentionally clenching your fist at a specific moment. Things you can use to radically upgrade your brain's capacity, literally starting today.
Okay, but I need to push back on the phrasing of that right out of the gate.
Go for it.
If this idea of taking a literal mental snapshot is just a Hollywood cliche like a biological impossibility, then what exactly are we upgrading to here?
That is a great question.
Like, are we just trying to build a slightly better, maybe color-coded filing cabinet for our thoughts? Or are we talking about fundamentally altering the physical hardware of our brains? Because if I think about a computer, am I just organizing the files on my desktop, or am I physically installing more RAM?
That tension right there is the perfect place to start, because we are actually talking about altering both the software and the hardware.
Wait, really? The physical hardware?
Yeah. You're not just rearranging the furniture in your mind. You are fundamentally altering how your brain processes, stores, and retrieves data through neuroplasticity.
Which is the brain's ability to physically reorganize itself.
Exactly, forming new neural connections. But to understand how to upgrade that hardware, we really have to clear away the science fiction version of memory first. We have to define the terms of service before we can hack the system, basically.
Okay, let's draw a clear line in the sand then, between two terms that people use totally interchangeably. I mean, I definitely use them interchangeably before diving into this material.
Photographic memory and eidetic memory.
Right. So right off the bat, photographic memory is usually described as the ability to view a scene and recall the visual elements in perfect, flawless detail. The layout of a room, the exact color of someone's shirt, the precise placement of a coffee cup on a table.
The literal camera snapshot.
Yeah. But eidetic memory, which actually derives from a Greek word meaning seen, is a much more specific, scientifically observed phenomenon.
It is. Eidetic memory refers to the capability to remember numbers, text, or very specific data points with extreme accuracy after only a super brief exposure.
So less I remember the texture of the carpet and more I remember this exact sequence of data.
Exactly. And their distinction is so vital because true photographic memory, that camera flash recall of an entire visual field without any errors, has basically never been conclusively proven to exist in adult humans.
Never.
Never conclusively.
Yeah.
But eidetic memory is measurable. And what's fascinating is how the human brain interacts with this capability, because most human beings actually experience bursts of eidetic memory from time to time.
Oh, right. The text calls this sporadic eidetic memory.
Yes, sporadic eidetic memory.
And the mechanics of when that sporadic memory triggers are what I find so unsettling, because the brain seems to completely ignore, trivia or your daily commute, but it kicks into absolute hyperdrive during deeply negative or traumatic events.
Right, it's a biological survival mechanism.
So it prioritizes survival over trivia.
Exactly. The brain doesn't care what you had for breakfast, but it desperately cares about the thing that almost killed you. These bursts of intense clarity almost always occur during moments of severe threat.
Like a car accident.
A car accident, or receiving terrible life-altering news. You can probably recall the exact quality of the light in the room, the precise words someone spoke, the smell of the air, the physical sensation of your clothes.
It's like time slows down and you just record everything.
Yes. In that fraction of a second, your amygdala, which is the emotion center of the brain, is screaming at your hippocampus. It's signaling that a life-threatening event is happening. So the brain just kicks into hyper-recording mode. It wants to capture every single variable of the environment so you can recognize and avoid that exact threat in the future.
Which is brilliant, biologically speaking, but it also implies that the machinery for a perfect memory is sitting inside every single one of us right now. It just requires a nightmare to turn the key.
That is a very heavy realization, yeah.
It really is. It means the superpower is in there. But for everyday life, for navigating the grocery store or studying for an exam, the architecture of our recall works entirely differently.
Completely differently.
There's this brilliant analogy from the text that completely shattered my understanding of how I remember things. Human memory is a puzzle, not a Polaroid.
I love that framing, because we tend to think of memory as a video recording.
Yeah.
Like we can just press play on a remote, sit back in our mental theater, and watch the past unfold exactly as it happened.
Right, but it's not.
It's not. It's actually a reconstructive process.
Yeah.
Every time you remember an event, you are actively piecing it back together in real time.
So you remember the main idea, like the corner pieces of the puzzle, the structural framework.
Exactly. But you might leave out the color of the walls or the music that was playing in the background. And the wild part is your brain often hallucinates those missing pieces to make the memory feel whole.
It just fills in the blanks with what it assumes should be there.
Yes, which is exactly why eyewitness testimony is notoriously unreliable.
Yeah. Okay. To visualize this reconstructive process, let's unpack that analogy from the text. Let's imagine your brain is this enormous, bustling corporate office.
Filled with hundreds of tiny desks.
Right. And at each desk sits a tiny secretary. So when you experience something, let's say you go to a vibrant, chaotic dinner party, your brain, specifically the hippocampus and the frontal cortex, acts as the boss of this office.
The micromanager.
Yeah. The boss takes that sensory experience of the dinner party, shatters it into dozens of little fragments, and hands out those fragments to all the different secretaries.
One secretary gets the sharp taste of the Cabernet.
Another gets the punchline of a joke your friend told. Another files away the warm temperature of the room. Another records the specific perfume the host was wearing. And they all just scatter and file their specific piece away in their own separate, localized cabinets across the brain.
This office analogy perfectly explains the mechanical nature of forgetting, because forgetting does not always mean the memory has been permanently deleted from the hard drive.
That's the part that blew my mind.
Right. It often just means the boss simply cannot locate all the secretaries who hold the pieces. When you try to recall that dinner party a month later, your brain has to send out a synchronized memo to gather all those specific files back into one coherent picture.
So if the secretary holding the name of the person you just met is out on a coffee break,
or if that specific filing cabinet is rusted shut from lack of use, you experience a memory lapse.
the information is physically still in the building. You have just lost the filing index to retrieve it.
Exactly.
Honestly, knowing that the data is still in the building is oddly comforting. It means I'm not necessarily losing my mind when I forget a name. I just have a highly inefficient management system in my frontal cortex.
We all do.
But speaking of brain offices that run with ruthless, almost supernatural efficiency, we have to look at the historical titans of memory from the book. There are documented, real people who possess memory skills that sound basically impossible.
These historical figures are so fun to study because they serve as extreme case studies. They provide a ceiling for what the human neurological architecture is technically capable of achieving.
The first one that stood out to me was Sergei Rachmaninoff, the legendary Russian composer.
Oh, his recall was absurd.
Other highly accomplished musicians would hand him these insanely complex, completely unfamiliar musical scores, and he would memorize them entirely in 1 to 2 days.
Every single note.
Every note, every dynamic shift, it's insane. And then there's Mr. T.
Yes, let's talk about Mr. T.
Most people know him as the tough guy with the mohawk, I pity the fool, all that. But he claimed he barely had to study in school, because he just naturally memorized everything he heard.
He spent his classes daydreaming, looking out the window, but he effortlessly absorbed all the auditory material.
That is the dream.
Mr. T's case is great because it highlights how memory capacity is not bound by traditional academic profiles. Superior retention doesn't necessarily correlate with being a bookworm.
Totally. Another bizarre but perfect example is Ferdinand Marcos, the former president of the Philippines. He famously memorized the exact intricate details of his wife Imelda's massive shoe collection.
Which was famously huge.
He knew the designers, the colors, the exact pair. It's a hilarious application of the skill, but it's a massive feat of data retention. And then you look at Teddy Roosevelt.
A voracious speed reader.
He read 2 to 3 entire books a day, every single day, regardless of his schedule. And he could recite large portions of them word for word during debates.
But Nikola Tesla presents perhaps the most fascinating case study of them all.
The flashes of light.
Yes.
Yeah.
He could recite entire books from memory, but his recall was intensely sensory. He reported experiencing blinding flashes of light associated with his recall, often tied to very vivid, unprompted flashbacks to his childhood.
Which suggests his memory recall bypassed standard linguistic retrieval.
Right, it tapped directly into the visual and sensory cortices. His brain was quite literally lighting up.
So hearing all these wild examples forces a major question for you, the listener. What is the secret sauce here? Are Rachmaninoff and Tesla just genetic mutants born with an entirely different biological framework? Or did they practice? Because if it's just genetics, we can all pack up and go home right now.
Well, the scientific consensus acknowledges that genetics definitely play a role. Some individuals are simply born with unique brain chemistry, maybe a natural eidetic tilt, an overactive hippocampus, or just a higher baseline of neuroplasticity.
Right.
However, lifestyle and training are the true verified keys to unlocking this for the average person. You are not doomed by your genetic baseline. The neurological hardware can absolutely be trained and expanded.
The quote from the text that perfectly encapsulates this reality is, everyone has a photographic memory, some just don't have film.
Exactly. The hardware, the camera lens, the shutter, the mechanical potential is present in almost every healthy human brain. But if you are not providing it with the right film, meaning the right training protocols, specific dietary building blocks, adequate sleep, you will never capture the image.
So knowing that people like Teddy Roosevelt could perform this kind of mental magic, and knowing that we supposedly have the same basic camera equipment in our heads, it begs a massive question.
How does it actually work?
Yeah. How does an average, everyday piece of information like where you put your car keys or the capital of a specific country actually become a permanent memory? Before we can start hacking the system, we need to look under the hood.
To understand the engine, we have to examine the biological architecture of remembering. Back in the late 1960s, psychologists Richard Atkinson and Richard Schifrin developed a foundational model of memory that cognitive science still heavily relies on today.
The Atkinson-Schifrin model.
Right. They broke the entire phenomenon down into 3 distinct chronological stages: encoding, storing, and retrieving.
Encoding is just getting the data in.
Yes. First, the data enters your brain through your senses. Your eyes see the text, your ears hear the sound. Then that raw sensory data has to be translated and filed away, which is storing. Finally, you have to be able to access that specific file on demand later. Retrieving.
And retrieving is where the rubber meets the road. If you are a student listening to this or a professional prepping for a board presentation, retrieval is the only part of the process that actually matters in the moment.
It's the ultimate test of the system.
The breakdown of the 3 R's of retrieval brings me right back to the cold sweat of middle school anxiety. Because memory is tested in 3 specific ways. First, there's recall.
The hardest one.
Right. This is your classic fill-in-the-blank question. You are reaching into the absolute void of your mind and pulling out a fact without any hints. Like, blank is the capital of Greece. You have to actively summon the word Athens.
Recall is the heaviest cognitive lift your brain can perform. It requires the frontal lobe to send a highly specific search query into the vast network of the cortex, locate the exact neurons holding that data, and reconstruct it entirely on your own without any scaffolding.
The second R is recognition. This is the multiple choice test. You don't have to summon the data from scratch out of the darkness. You just have to identify it when it's placed in front of you.
Which of these 4 cities is the capital?
Exactly. You scan the list, see Athens, and your brain pings with familiarity.
Recognition requires significantly less metabolic energy. The visual cue of seeing the word Athens acts as a direct prompt. To use your earlier analogy, the visual cue hands the memo directly to the correct secretary, rather than making the boss search the entire building.
That makes so much sense. And the third R is relearning. This happens when you are studying for finals. You learned the Greek timeline in September. You completely forgot it by December. But when you look at the textbook again, you learn it way faster the second time around.
The pathway is already paved in your brain. It might have some weeds growing over it from months of neglect, but the road is there.
So the Atkinson-Shiffrin model also illustrates the different vaults in our brain because information doesn't just flow from the outside world directly into one giant permanent pool.
No, it must pass through a strict biological filtration system. The first filter is short-term memory.
Which is incredibly fleeting.
Very fleeting. Data stays in the short-term filter for under 30 seconds unless you actively rehearse it. And its capacity is shockingly small. The average human mind can only hold 4 to 7 distinct bits of data at any given time in short-term memory.
Wait, 4 to 7 bits? That is functionally nothing. A standard phone number is 10 bits.
Which perfectly explains why, if someone tells you a phone number and you don't write it down or repeat it aloud immediately, it vanishes into the ether. It literally exceeds the physical buffer size of the short-term filter.
That's wild.
Now, the bridge between that tiny short-term filter and the massive permanent vault of the brain is what cognitive psychologists call working memory. Working memory is an active, dynamic process. It involves processing visual spatial information, utilizing a central executive that directs your conscious attention, and employing auditory rehearsal.
Like repeating a person's name over and over in your head while shaking your hand. John, John, John.
Exactly. Now, if the data survives that working memory gauntlet, it finally reaches long-term memory.
The ridiculously spacious storage unit?
Yes. But inside that warehouse, things are sorted even further into explicit memory and implicit memory. Let's break down explicit first. Explicit memory is conscious storage. It requires deliberate effort,
You are actively trying to remember a fact.
like knowing Athens is the capital of Greece or remembering a math formula. You filed that away on purpose, and you must consciously retrieve it. Implicit memory, on the other hand, is entirely automatic and unconscious. It is a biological or emotional association your brain made without your permission.
The dentist scenario from the text is the perfect way to understand implicit memory.
Oh, the root canal.
Yeah. Let's say you had a terrible, painful root canal a year ago. The next time you walk into a dentist's office, before you even check in at the front desk, your palms start sweating, your heart rate spikes, your mouth goes dry.
You didn't consciously think to yourself, I'm now going to pull up the file on my root canal and instruct my nervous system to panic.
Exactly. Your implicit memory bypassed your conscious brain entirely and triggered the physiological response automatically.
Furthermore, explicit long-term memory is divided into 2 subcategories, procedural and episodic. Procedural memory is the knowledge of how to perform physical tasks, riding a bike, tying your shoes, touch typing. Once you learn it, it transfers to the basal ganglia and the cerebellum, making it automatic.
You don't have to think about balance once you know how to ride a bike.
Right. Episodic memory, however, is deeply personal. It's tied to specific life events and autobiographical moments.
It's remembering the exact moment in high school chemistry class when a classmate leaned too far back and fell out of her chair.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, there is a concept here that is critical for anyone trying to study or master a new skill. The concept of depth of processing. We have shallow processing and deep processing.
Shallow processing is just rote memorization, right?
Staring at flashcards until your eyes bleed. Memorizing the superficial sound or visual structure of a word. But if you want the data to actually stick in the long-term vault, you have to use deep processing. You have to attach a meaning, a personal connection, a narrative, or an emotion to the bare facts.
Which explains the universal frustration of reading a textbook page 5 times and retaining absolutely nothing.
Because you are only processing the text shallowly. You're just visually scanning the shapes of the words without interrogating the meaning. To achieve deep processing, you have to ask yourself, Why does this matter? How does this concept connect to a framework I already understand? Can I explain this to a 5-year-old?
Okay, I have a major biological pushback here.
There.
If human biology dictates that our short-term brain can physically only hold 4 to 7 bits of information at a time, isn't it just physically, structurally impossible to have an eidetic memory? How does someone memorize a 50-digit number in 30 seconds if their brain chemically kicks out the data after digit number 7? It sounds like trying to pour a fire hose into a shot glass.
It does sound impossible.
Yeah.
The biological hard limit of the short-term memory buffer is real, but the brain has a brilliant software workaround called chunking.
Chunking.
Yes. Think of the limitation this way. The limit is not 4 to 7 individual numbers or letters. The limit is 4 to 7 items or concepts.
Okay, so a concept can be bigger than a single letter.
Exactly. If I give you the letters F, B, I, C, I, A, I, R, S, that is 9 separate, disconnected bits of data, your short-term memory will immediately overload. But if you chunk those exact same letters into recognizable patterns, FBI, CIA, IRS, you now only have 3 bits of data.
Oh, wow. You bypass the limit.
You bypass the biological limit by grouping meaningless information into meaningful pre-existing chunks. This is the foundational secret of individuals who display seemingly impossible memory feats. When a memory champion looks at a 50-digit number, they are not holding 50 separate digits. They are holding 5 distinct chunks of 10 digits, which they've associated with a vivid story or image.
That is incredible. Now, because we can't physically feel this data limit happening in real time, because the biological machinery is totally invisible to our conscious mind, humanity has spent centuries inventing absolute fiction about how memory actually works.
We invent myths to fill our blind spots.
Exactly. So we need to clear the junk data from our own hard drives and systematically bust some of the most widespread memory myths in existence.
Let's do it. These misconceptions actively prevent people from utilizing correct techniques.
Let's put the camera myth on the chopping block first. The brain does not take a snapshot. There is no shutter mechanism in the visual cortex. If you are hoping a smart drug or a masterclass will turn your retinas into camera lenses, you are chasing a ghost.
The most powerful analogy to replace the flawed camera myth is the cardboard box analogy. It perfectly illustrates the critical difference between raw memory capacity and memory organization.
Let me test my understanding of this. We tend to think that someone with a good memory was simply born with a massive multi-terabyte hard drive, and the rest of us are walking around with a dusty floppy disk.
Right.
So when the genius learns a new fact, they just toss it into their massive storage space. But the reality is much more like physical cardboard boxes. The person with the trained photographic style memory might actually have a smaller physical box than you do.
The difference lies entirely in the filing system.
Right. When you learn a fact, you write it on a piece of paper, crumple it up, and toss it haphazardly into your box. When the trained individual learns a fact, they fold it perfectly, color code it, label it, and place it neatly in a specific corner. When it is time to retrieve that fact during a high-stakes exam, the organized box wins every single time.
Because the person with the giant box is frantically digging through a mountain of crumpled, chaotic trash, unable to find the single piece of paper they need. The cardboard box analogy shifts the paradigm away from, I don't have enough biological capacity, to, I simply lack an efficient organizational system.
Let's methodically execute some of these other myths. Hypnosis is a big one. Pop culture constantly tells us that a hypnotist can swing a pocket watch, and suddenly you recover lost memories from your childhood or remember a license plate from a decade ago.
The clinical reality of hypnosis is vastly different. While it can induce deep relaxation, rigorous scientific studies show it rarely, if ever, aids in accurate objective recollection of repressed facts.
Wait, really? So it doesn't work?
Not for objective truth. The danger is that hypnosis can actually facilitate the creation of false memories. Because the patient is in a highly suggestible, vulnerable state, a leading question from the hypnotist can cause the patient's brain to fabricate a memory out of thin air. And they wake up deeply believing a completely fictional event occurred.
That is terrifying. Okay, what about the soap opera staple? Amnesia wipes your entire identity. You get hit on the head, you wake up in the hospital, and you don't know your own name or who your spouse is.
Hollywood-style retrograde amnesia, the complete erasure of past identity, is incredibly rare in real-world neurology. The vast majority of clinical amnesia is anterograde amnesia.
Which is what exactly?
It's a severe disruption of the encoding process going forward. The person perfectly remembers their childhood, their core identity, their family, but the bridge from short-term to long-term memory is broken. They cannot convert new experiences into permanent files. They might have a fascinating conversation with you, and 10 minutes later, they have absolutely no recollection that the conversation ever took place.
Like the movie Memento.
Exactly like Memento.
The next myth is probably printed on motivational posters in classrooms all over the world. We only use 10% of our brain. The implication being, if we could unlock the other 90%, we'd have telekinesis and perfect recall.
Categorically false. There is zero neuroimaging data to support the 10% myth. Functional MRI scans demonstrate that activity pulses across the entire brain, utilizing nearly all regions, even during simple tasks like walking. The truth is not that we possess 90% dormant tissue. The truth is we frequently fail to use our existing neural networks efficiently.
Here is a myth that impacts our justice system every day. If someone is extremely confident in their memory of an event, they are probably accurate. If they swear on a Bible in a courtroom, we should believe them.
The correlation between confidence and accuracy in memory retrieval is shockingly low. Human memory is notoriously malleable. You can be 100% utterly convinced that you saw a suspect wearing a bright red jacket, swear to it under oath, and be objectively, definitively proven wrong by security camera footage. Confidence is an emotional state generated by the brain. It is not a metric of data integrity.
Wow. And the final myth connects directly to how we teach children to study. Memorizing things constantly, just running endless flashcards, will boost your overall memory capacity, treating memory like a bicep that you can just curl until it gets huge.
Mindless repetition of random facts does not improve the overarching skill of memory. It only makes you highly proficient at remembering those specific isolated facts. It's like assuming that typing the exact same sentence 1,000 times will make you a brilliant novelist. You're practicing the keystrokes, but you aren't learning narrative structure. Practicing actual memory techniques is what improves overall cognitive function.
Memory is not a thing you possess in a jar. It is an activity you perform. It's a verb, not a noun. But let's play devil's advocate for a moment. Let's say a listener takes all of this to heart. They build the perfect cardboard box. They organize every file perfectly. What is it actually like to live with that hardware? Is it pure bliss, floating effortlessly through life? Or is there a dark side to never being able to delete a file?
The blessing and the curse of living with extraordinary recall is a profound psychological study. The pros are obvious. You can speed read complex texts and retain granular information. You become a phenomenal judge of character because you instantly cross-reference micro-expressions against every previous interaction. You ace exams. Artists can paint bustling street scenes from memory.
But the psychological burden of carrying every single piece of data must be immense because the healthy brain gracefully lets go of trivial information, and more importantly, it dulls the sharp edges of painful memories over time. A highly eidetic mind struggles to execute that fading process.
They are forced to recall things they desperately want to forget with high-definition clarity. Severe past traumas, humiliating public moments, or even just the gory details of a horror movie they saw a decade ago. It creates overwhelming baseline stress.
The real-life case studies of this are deeply complicated. Let's examine the case of Betty from Michigan. On her morning commute alone, she sees 80 to 100 people. And her brain automatically memorizes the exact jewelry they're wearing, the precise fabric of their outfits, and their exact spatial location on the train.
Which sounds like an incredible parlor trick, until you realize she has absolutely zero control over it. It's an unyielding flood of sensory data. Hearing a specific song on the radio can trap her in a psychological time warp, forcing her to viscerally relive past memories. She experiences terrifying visual overlaps where past math equations will literally project over her reality, making it impossible to focus on the present.
And she can't even escape it when she sleeps. She avoids watching certain cartoons because a childhood nightmare of Winnie the Pooh attacking her will play on an infinite loop in her mind. Then there's the famously profiled case of Jill Price, the woman who can't forget. If you ask Jill what she was doing on August 14th, 1989, she won't just tell you it was a Monday. She'll tell you the exact weather, her outfit, her lunch, the evening news, and exactly how she felt.
But Jill views the condition as a heavy, exhausting burden. She lives with a paralyzing fear of losing the gift, while simultaneously feeling dehumanized by the scientific community. She describes feeling lonely because her conscious mind is constantly tethered to the past. She cannot remain present.
It sounds like being trapped inside a museum dedicated to your own life, where every exhibit is playing at maximum volume. The third case study, Andy, has a GPS brain.
Yes. Andy acts as a human file system for his friends on road trips. He can effortlessly recall every street sign and turn. But his story highlights a crucial distinction. Having an expansive memory capacity does not inherently translate to being smarter in the traditional sense of critical thinking.
Right. Retaining raw information is absolutely not the same thing as understanding information. He just holds the data. He also noted that alcohol actively and aggressively disrupts his mental filing system, proving that the system relies on physical health.
These stories prove that an unfiltered memory is an evolutionary disadvantage.
Which means we shouldn't actually want a flawless, always-on photographic memory. A camera that never stops recording just fills up the hard drive with garbage. What you, the listener, really want at 2 a.m. is controlled recall. The ability to flawlessly retrieve the specific data you consciously choose to keep.
Controlled recall is the holy grail. And to engineer that, we have to look backward at our ancestors. The human brain did not evolve to memorize Excel spreadsheets. We evolved as hunter-gatherers navigating a dangerous physical world.
So our brains are hardwired to remember spatial layouts, like the route to water, and things that elicit a strong emotional reaction. Funny, offensive, or absurd things, because an absurd animal in your environment is a potential threat or food source.
Exactly. By understanding those evolutionary rhythms, we can hack our modern memory. Instead of trying to force your brain to remember a sterile list of words, you translate that list into a spatial layout filled with absurd, highly emotional imagery. You feed the brain data in the exact format it evolved to digest. This is the foundation of the memory palace, or the method of loci.
If you take absolutely nothing else away from this deep dive, let it be this next segment. We are going to build a memory palace right now, in real time. Walk me through it using the grocery list example from the text.
Step 1. Select a familiar building or environment, a physical space you know intimately, like your childhood home.
Okay, I'm using my childhood home in Chicago. I know every squeaky floorboard.
Perfect. Steps 2 and 3 involve translation and placement. You need to memorize a short list: burgers, ketchup, and hamburger buns. Instead of repeating the words, we translate them into absurd, unforgettable imagery and place them along path in your house. Remember, the more bizarre or terrifying the image, the more aggressively the brain will encode it.
Okay. So I am visualizing walking up the concrete steps to my childhood home. I swing the front door open, and standing right there in the small foyer is a massive, full-grown cow. And the cow is entirely on fire. It's mooing loudly, flames blazing. That visceral image equals my first item, burgers.
You've successfully engaged the visual cortex, spatial navigation, and the amygdala. You will not forget a flaming cow. Now move to the next waypoint.
I step around the flaming cow, walk down the hallway toward the wooden staircase. As I look at the stairs, they are completely drenched, absolutely dripping in thick red blood coming from the cow. It's pooling on the steps. It smells metallic. That graphic image equals my second item, ketchup.
Excellent. You've anchored the data and amplified the shock value. Proceed up the stairs for the final item.
I walk up the bloody stairs, get to the top landing, and sitting right there in the exact middle of the hallway floor is a giant, human-sized pair of buttocks, just blocking the path. It's ridiculous and funny, and it perfectly translates to my third item, hamburger buns.
Step 4 is retrieval. When you walk into the grocery store, you don't panic. You simply take a calm mental stroll through your childhood home. You open the front door, flaming cow, burgers, look at the stairs, blood, ketchup, top landing, giant buttocks, buns. It feels utterly silly, but it works with absolute efficiency.
It's incredible, and you can scale this up infinitely to memorize entire speeches. But spatial layout isn't the only tool. Let's talk about mind mapping and chunking. We touched on chunking earlier, but mind mapping is a different beast entirely.
Mind mapping is essentially externalizing your working memory. Instead of juggling complex relationships in your head, you draw them out visually on a page, starting with a core concept in the center and drawing branches outward. It forces your brain to see the big picture hierarchy, deepening the processing level.
Then there are mnemonics and image association, like visualizing 100 literal blazing suns hovering over the exact spot on your coffee table where you just placed a book called 100 Suns. That absurd image will flash in your mind and trigger the spatial location later.
The key is intentionality, forcing the brain to encode the moment rather than letting it slip by on autopilot.
Let's ground this for the listener. What if someone is studying for a massive certification exam tomorrow morning? What is their action plan for tonight?
You must ruthlessly tailor these techniques to your specific biological learning style. The VARK model: visual, auditory, reading, writing, kinesthetic. Stop fighting your biology.
Right. If you are a visual learner, don't just read dense paragraphs. Draw mind maps and build memory palaces. If you're auditory, read your notes out loud or invent little rhythmic songs. If you are a reading-writing learner, aggressively rewrite your notes from scratch. And if you're kinesthetic, pace the room while reciting facts or use physical flashcards you can touch. Sitting still is killing your attention.
Those are fantastic for daily life. But what if you want to push your biological hardware to the extreme limits?
This is the hardcore science fiction stuff. There is a military training exercise called the picture ingraining technique, used for rapid facial recognition and data memorization.
It requires absolute discipline, but the neuroplasticity it induces is remarkable.
Walk us through the setup.
You go into a windowless, pitch dark room. You need a bright desk lamp, a paragraph of text, and a blank piece of paper with a hole cut in the middle to block all peripheral distractions. You turn on the light, illuminating only the text, and stare unblinking at that paragraph for exactly 5 continuous minutes.
5 minutes of unblinking focus sounds physically painful.
It is deeply uncomfortable. The goal is to saturate the photoreceptors in your retinas. After 5 minutes, you instantly turn off the light, plunging the room into pitch darkness, but you keep staring straight ahead. The bright image of the text will literally be burned into your retinas as an afterimage. You force your brain to interrogate that glowing afterimage. Repeat daily for a month.
It's an extreme form of forging neural pathways. But if that's too intense, there are progressive overload drills with household items. It's like taking your brain to the gym. You start with the empty bar, which for your brain is 3 standard UNO cards.
Progressive overload is the fundamental principle of biological adaptation. Draw 3 UNO cards, memorize them, shuffle, and recreate the order. Do that daily for a week. The next week, 5 cards, then 10. The goal is to progressively expand the capacity of your working memory.
You can do the exact same thing with dominoes. Build a complex spatial pattern with 10 dominoes, memorize it, destroy it, and rebuild it from memory. Add 10 more each week. The material also delves into computer programs that push 3 specific variables: speed, space, and quantity.
To train speed, software flashes 10 random numbers for just 100 milliseconds, training your brain's instant perception. To train space, you read a 10-digit number spread far apart on a screen using only your peripheral vision, widening your brain's visual net. Quantity training steadily increases data volume while decreasing the viewing time, forcing your buffer capacity to adapt to extreme stress.
Okay, so we have military light boxes, flaming cows, and peripheral vision stretching. But the final chapters make a deeply sobering point. You can do all the mental gymnastics in the world, but if the physical hardware of your brain is degraded, the software won't run. You can't run a brand new video game on a computer from 1995.
The biological foundation is completely non-negotiable. The hippocampus is a highly sensitive, metabolically demanding tissue dependent on your lifestyle choices.
So how do we physically upgrade the hardware? It starts with brain fuel. The text lists walnuts, cauliflower, broccoli, crab, blueberries, and healthy omega-3 fatty acids.
The human brain is composed largely of fat. The cell membranes of your neurons require structural fats like omega-3s to remain fluid. If the membranes are flexible, neurotransmitters can pass signals easily.
And you must aggressively avoid excess processed sugar and damaged omega-6s found in industrial vegetable oils.
Because they create massive systemic inflammation, which actively degrades cognitive function and physically shrinks the hippocampus over time.
Then there is physical exercise. Regular cardiovascular exercise actually grows the physical size of your memory center by a couple of % every single year.
By increasing blood flow and releasing brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF, which stimulates the growth of new nerve cells.
And sleep. You require an absolute minimum of 4 to 6 hours of high-quality sleep for neuroplasticity to occur at all.
Sleep is a highly active state of biological housekeeping. Your brain replays and consolidates memories, moving them to long-term storage, while the glymphatic system physically washes toxic metabolic waste out of your brain tissue. Deprive yourself of sleep, and you suffocate your memory in biological waste.
We also have to address the myth of multitasking. The text drops a terrifying statistic. It takes a minimum of 8 unbroken seconds of absolute focus to commit a piece of information to memory.
That 8-second bottleneck is a hard biological limit. If you put your keys down while talking on the phone, that 8 seconds of focus never happens. The memory file is never created in the first place. Mindfulness is the ultimate memory hack.
Okay, I promise some bizarre tricks, and the text delivers. Trick number 1. Clench your fists. Why does hand clenching help me retrieve a file?
Clenching your right hand activates the left hemisphere of your brain, which is heavily involved in memory encoding. Clenching your left hand activates the right hemisphere, which aids in retrieval. The motor function acts as a physical trigger for the cognitive network, though this specific trick is currently only proven highly effective in right-handed individuals.
So weird, but so easy to do under a desk. Next trick, chewing gum. It increases blood flow, but there is a secondary mechanism.
State-dependent memory. Chewing acts as a physical association to the memory you are forming. If you chew a specific flavor while studying, chewing that exact same flavor during the exam reinstates the biological context, making retrieval significantly easier.
Which ties into smell association. The olfactory bulb has a direct anatomical superhighway to the memory centers of the brain.
Yes, smell goes straight to the amygdala and hippocampus. If you spray a specific perfume on your wrist while reading a dense chapter and smell that same scent during the exam, you bypass the standard retrieval process and pull up those files instantly.
Posture association works the same way. If you study cross-legged on the floor, your brain associates that bodily state with the data. Take the test cross-legged if you can. And finally, a trick that might make you look eccentric but yields incredible results. Talking to yourself out loud.
Repeating things aloud boosts memory accuracy by up to 15%.
15% is the difference between a B and an A. Why does it work?
It multiplies the pathways of encoding. You are visually reading it, engaging the motor cortex to speak it, and engaging the auditory processing centers to hear it simultaneously. 3 distinct neural pathways to the exact same piece of data.
It's a totally free intervention. Well, let's wrap this up. Huge congratulations to you, the listener, for finishing this entire deep dive with us. We learned that the Hollywood version of a photographic memory is a biological myth. But a limitless, highly organized memory is incredibly real and entirely achievable through deliberate practice and protecting your physical hardware.
You have the camera, you just need to develop the film.
My challenge to you today is simple. Try just one technique. Clench your right hand or visualize a flaming cow in your hallway. Just experiment with the incredible hardware you were given.
As we conclude, I want to leave you with a broader philosophical concept. In our data-obsessed culture, we treat forgetting as a tragic flaw. But what if the ability to forget, to let the minor or painful details slowly fade away so the emotional core of our lives can shine through, is actually the brain's most advanced evolutionary feature? Ask yourself, what are you holding on to that your brain is desperately trying to let go of?
That is a stunning thought to end on. Thank you, as always, for joining us on this deep dive. Keep asking hard questions, keep challenging your brain, and most importantly, keep learning. We will catch you on the next one.